You'll stay right there until I decide otherwise. Your family doesn't scare me.
I watched my 7-year-old son ride away on his bike that beautiful Saturday morning. 30 minutes later, the HOA president called with words that froze my blood. I am detaining your son for trespassing. She held him prisoner in her house, ignoring his screams for me, his desperate cries to come home. She made the biggest mistake of her life. My brother is FBI, and she had about 60 seconds of freedom left. Before you watch this full story, please comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Also, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. The sun was just beginning to rise over Maple Ridge subdivision when I watched my 7-year-old son Jamie pedal his bike down our driveway. His helmet sat slightly crooked on his head the way it always did, because he absolutely insisted on putting it on himself. Those little training wheels we'd removed just last month still sat in our garage, a bittersweet reminder of how fast he was growing up. Stay on our street, buddy. I called out from the porch, my coffee mug warming my hands against the cool September morning air. I know, Mom, he shouted back with that perfect mix of excitement and exasperation that only 7-year-olds can manage. His backpack bounced as he pedaled, probably filled with the Pokemon cards he'd been obsessively collecting all summer long. I smiled and went back inside to finish packing his lunch. It was supposed to be just a normal Saturday, the kind where nothing remarkable happens, where life is simple and safe. I'm a single mom, working double shifts at the hospital just to keep our small house in this neighborhood. The mortgage is tight every month, but I wanted Jamie to grow up somewhere safe. Somewhere with good schools and wide sidewalks, where kids could ride their bikes without worry. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Marcus, landing at 3 p.m. Can't wait to see you guys. I grinned. Marcus was coming home for the first time in 8 months. He worked for the FBI, though he could never tell me much about what he actually did. Something about federal investigations and organized crime. All I really knew was that my little brother had grown up to become someone important, someone who protected people. I glanced at the clock. 8:30 a.m. I'd give Jamie another 30 minutes of freedom, then call him in for breakfast. He absolutely loved his Saturday morning bike rides, that brief taste of independence before homework and chores took over. I never imagined that in those 30 minutes, my entire world would shatter into pieces. At 9 a.m., I stepped onto the porch to call Jamie back for breakfast. What I discovered in the next few minutes would turn into every parent's worst nightmare. Stay with me, because what this HOA president did was so unthinkable, it made national news. At 9 a.m. exactly, I stepped onto the porch to call Jamie back inside. The street was empty. A few neighbors were out washing their cars or working in their gardens, but there was no small boy on a blue bike anywhere in sight. Jamie, I called out, not worried yet. He probably just rode to the end of the street to show off his new no training wheels skills to Tommy from 2 houses down. I walked to the end of our driveway, shielding my eyes from the morning sun. Jamie, breakfast, nothing. That's when the first flutter of real anxiety touched my stomach. I pulled out my phone and called his smartwatch, the one he wore everywhere. It rang 4 times, then went to the automated message. He always answered. Always. I started walking down the street, calling his name louder now. Mrs. Peterson looked up from her roses with concern on her face. Have you seen Jamie? I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. Not this morning, dear. Is everything okay? I'm sure it's fine, I said, though my heart was already racing. He probably lost track of time. But I walked faster now, checking between houses, looking down side streets. The neighborhood suddenly felt enormous, full of places a small boy could be. My calls became more desperate, more frantic. Jamie, answer me, please. By 9:30, I was running. I'd covered every street in our section of the subdivision. His bike was nowhere. He was nowhere. I called 911 with shaking hands, barely able to get the words out. My son is missing. He's 7 years old. He went for a bike ride an hour ago, and he's not answering his phone, and I can't find him anywhere. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. The operator said, "What's your address?" I gave them the information through tears. I didn't even remember starting to cry. The operator assured me the police were on their way, but every second felt like an hour. Every minute without my son felt like drowning. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Jamie," I answered frantically, my heart pounding. "Is this Mrs. Chen?" A woman's voice, sharp, cold, completely emotionless. "Yes. Do you have my son? Where is he?" "Your son was caught trespassing on private property. I am detaining him until the proper authorities can address this situation." My blood turned to ice. "What? Who is this? Where is my son?" "This is Karen Hendricks, president of the Maple Ridge HOA. Your son violated multiple community regulations, and I have every right to. You took my child." My voice cracked between pure rage and absolute terror. "Where is he?" "He is perfectly safe in my home, and he will remain here until—" I didn't hear the rest. I was already running toward Karen Hendricks' house at the end of Sterling Court, the largest house in the subdivision, with its perfectly manicured lawn and American flag that she raised and lowered with military precision every single day. I had met Karen exactly twice. Once, when I moved in 3 years ago, she'd handed me a 3-ring binder of HOA rules with a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. The second time was when she left a violation notice on my door because my grass was a 1/4 inch too tall. She was a widow in her late 50s, retired from something she considered very important, and she ran the HOA like it was a military operation. I'd heard stories from neighbors about her reign of terrifying people for holiday decorations, calling animal control on pets, making life miserable for anyone who didn't follow her rules perfectly. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. I pounded on her door so hard my fist hurt. "Open this door. Give me my son." The door opened slowly. Karen stood there in her cream cardigan and pearl necklace, her silver hair in its usual tight bun. Behind her, I could see Jamie sitting on a formal dining chair, his face red and streaked with tears. "Mommy," he screamed. I tried to push past her, but she actually blocked the doorway with her body. "Mrs. Chen, you need to calm down. Get out of my way." I shoved past her and ran to Jamie, pulling him into my arms. He was sobbing uncontrollably, his whole body shaking. "She said I was bad, Mom," he cried. "She said I was breaking the law. She wouldn't let me leave. I wanted to come home, and she wouldn't let me." I checked him over frantically, no visible injuries. But the trauma in his eyes broke something fundamental inside me. "You can't just take him," Karen said from behind us, her voice still eerily calm. "He was riding his bicycle on the community green space, which is clearly marked as pedestrian only in Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws. Furthermore, he was unaccompanied by an adult, which violates Section 12.8 regarding minor supervision." I stood up slowly, still holding Jamie, and turned to face her. I had never felt rage like this before, white hot and all-consuming. "You kidnapped my child. I did no such thing. I detained a rule breaker. He is 7 years old. You took him from the street and wouldn't let him leave. That is kidnapping." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Karen's expression finally shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty. "The police will confirm that I acted within my rights," she said, though her voice was less certain now. 2 patrol cars pulled up outside, and what happened next proved that even HOA presidents aren't above the law. But this was just the beginning. What my FBI brother did when he found out will restore your faith in justice this Christmas season. 2 patrol cars pulled up outside. I carried Jamie out onto the porch as 2 officers got out. "Ma'am, are you Mrs. Chen?" the first officer asked. "Yes. This woman took my son. She's been holding him here for over 30 minutes. The officer looked at Karen. "Ma'am, is this true?" "I am Karen Hendricks, president of the Maple Ridge HOA," she said with her chin raised. "The child was in violation of community rules, and I was simply— Did you prevent this child from leaving your home?" The second officer interrupted. Karen hesitated. "I was waiting for his mother to arrive so we could discuss. That's a yes or no question." "Ma'am," He needed to learn that rules have consequences. Both officers exchanged a look. The first one stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to understand something very clearly. You cannot detain a child for any reason. That is false imprisonment, potentially kidnapping." Karen's face went pale. "But I'm the HOA president. I have authority over you, have no legal authority to hold anyone against their will, especially not a minor child." For the first time, I saw real fear in Karen Hendricks' eyes, but it wasn't enough. Not even close. The next few hours were a blur of police interviews and medical checks. They took Jamie to the hospital as a precaution. Physically, he was fine. Emotionally, he was devastated. He kept asking me if he was bad, if he'd done something wrong. "No, baby," I told him over and over, holding him close in the hospital room. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. That woman is sick, and what she did was very, very wrong." Detective Rodriguez, the kind-faced woman assigned to the case, took my statement. She told me Karen had been arrested and charged with false imprisonment and child endangerment. "We'll make sure she faces consequences," she assured me. No one has the right to do what she did. But as I drove Jamie home that evening, past Karen's house where I could see her through the window, talking on the phone, probably to some expensive lawyer, I felt hollow inside. Yes, she'd been arrested. Yes, she'd face charges. But would that really be enough? My phone buzzed as we pulled into our driveway. "Marcus. Hey sis, just landed. Coming straight to you. Got your voicemail." What happened? I had forgotten I'd called him in my panic, left a frantic, crying message. "Marcus, something really bad happened. Can you come over now? I'm already in the car. Be there in 20 minutes. My brother Marcus is 34 years old, 6 feet tall, and has the kind of presence that makes people instinctively straighten up when he enters a room. He'd been in the military before joining the FBI, and he carried himself with a quiet intensity that could be either comforting or intimidating, depending on the situation. When he walked through my door that evening and saw Jamie curled up on the couch with his favorite blanket, refusing to talk, I watched my brother's expression shift from concern to something much harder. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. We sat at the kitchen table while Jamie watched cartoons at low volume. I told Marcus every detail: Karen's phone call, finding Jamie crying in her house, her insane justifications about HOA rules, the way Jamie kept asking if he was bad. With each detail, Marcus's jaw grew tighter. His hands, clasped on the table, slowly formed into fists. "She held him for over 30 minutes, I said, my voice breaking again. "He was calling for me, and she wouldn't let him use his phone. She told him he was being punished." "Where does she live?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Marcus, the police already arrested her. She's being charged." "That's not what I asked." "End of Sterling Court, the big house with the white columns." He stood up. "I'm going for a walk." "Marcus, don't do anything. I'm going for a walk," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. I should have stopped him, but part of Mitha, part that was still shaking with rage, and Tara didn't want to. Marcus walked slowly down Sterling Court. He'd dealt with dangerous criminals, had stared down gang leaders and corrupt officials. None of them had ever made him feel what he felt right now. They'd threatened a 7-year-old child, his nephew. He stood in front of Karen Hendricks' house. The lights were on inside. Through the window, he could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear. He walked up to the door and knocked. 3 solid reps. Karen answered, still in her cream cardigan. When she saw him, something in her expression changed. Maybe she sensed the threat. "Can I help you?" she asked coldly. "I'm Marcus Chen. That was my nephew you kidnapped this morning." "I did not kidnap anyone. I was enforcing community." "Let me be very clear," Marcus said, his voice soft but sharp as a knife. "If you ever come within 100 feet of that child again, if you ever speak to him, if you ever even look at him, you will regret it in ways you cannot imagine." Karen actually laughed. "Are you threatening me? I'll call the police." "Please do." I'd love to explain to them why you thought you had the right to hold a 7-year-old boy prisoner in your home. It wasn't like that. He was violating. I don't care about your rules, Marcus interrupted. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign as HOA president. You're going to sell this house and move out of this neighborhood. And you're going to stay away from my family. Or what? Karen drew herself up to her full height. You can't intimidate me. I have lawyers, I have rights, and I have every intention of fighting these ridiculous charges. You're making a mistake, Marcus said quietly. Are you threatening me again? Because I'm recording this conversation. She held up her phone triumphantly. Good, then you'll have proof of the moment I warned you to back off. What you do with that warning is up to you. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, Karen did something so insane, so unbelievably arrogant, that it sealed her fate forever. What my FBI brother discovered about her past will shock you. 2 days later, I found an official-looking letter in my mailbox. It was from the Maple Ridge HOA, signed by Karen Hendricks. Notice of violation and fine. Dear Mrs. Chen, on September 14th, your minor dependent was observed operating a bicycle in prohibited areas. Specifically, the community green space designated for pedestrian use only, per Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws. This violation carries a fine of $500. Additionally, said minor was unaccompanied by an adult guardian in community common areas, violating Section 12.8. This violation carries an additional fine of $500. Total amount due, $1,000. I stared at the letter in absolute disbelief. She was doubling down. After being arrested for kidnapping my son, she was now trying to find me for his violations. My hands shook as I called Marcus. She sent me a letter. She's fining me $1,000 because Jamie rode his bike on the grass. Silence on the other end. Then, forward me that letter. And do you have a copy of your HOA agreement? Yes, somewhere in my files. Why? Because I'm going to bury her. What I didn't know was that my brother had already started digging into Karen Hendricks' life. He had resources most people don't. Databases, contacts, ways of finding information that weren't exactly public. He'd learned that Karen had been the HOA president for 12 years, that she'd driven 3 families out of the neighborhood with constant fines and harassment, that she'd been sued twice for discrimination, but had settled both cases with He'd also learned something much more interesting. Karen wasn't just a retired busybody. She'd worked for a mortgage company before, retiring a mortgage company that had been investigated for fraud, but had shut down before charges could be filed. Karen had been the regional manager. Marcus made a call to a colleague in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Hey, Sarah, I need a favor. I need everything you can find on someone. Karen Hendricks, age 57, lives in Colorado. While he waited for that information, he made another call to the local prosecutor's office. This is Special Agent Chen with the FBI. I'm calling about a case in your jurisdiction. Karen Hendricks, arrested for false imprisonment and child endangerment 2 days ago. Marcus listened, his expression darkening. She's out on bail. What was the amount? $2,000. That's it for kidnapping a child. He immediately called a lawyer friend who specialized in civil rights cases. David, I need you to file a lawsuit. Civil rights violation, emotional distress, false imprisonment. 1 week after Karen kidnapped Jamie, there was a mandatory HOA meeting. I almost didn't go. Jamie was still having nightmares, waking up crying that the mean lady was coming to get him. But Marcus convinced me to attend. Trust me, he said. You need to be there. The meeting was held in the community center. About 30 homeowners showed up. Karen stood at the front, behind a podium with her usual stack of papers and that 3-ring binder of rules. Let's call this meeting to order, she began, her voice crisp and authoritative. I sat in the back row with Marcus beside me. Several neighbors who knew what happened gave me sympathetic looks. Karen began with her usual agenda reminders about lawn maintenance, complaints about trash bins, and a proposal to ban certain house paint colors. Then she got to new business, "I'd like to address the unfortunate incident from last week," she said, looking directly at me. "There have been questions about my handling of a rule violation involving a minor child. I want to assure everyone that I acted entirely within my authority as HOA president." Murmurs around the room, some confused, some uncomfortable. The child in question was clearly violating multiple community regulations. "As president, I have not only the right, but the duty to enforce our rules." "You kidnapped my son," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen's expression hardened. "I did no such thing. I temporarily detained a rule breaker. He's 7 years old." I stood up. "You held him prisoner in your house. He was crying and begging to come home, and you wouldn't let him." Now the murmurs grew much louder. I could see shock on many faces. "Mrs. Chen, you are out of order," Karen said sharply. "If you cannot conduct yourself appropriately, I'll have you removed." "You were arrested," I continued. "The police arrested you for what you did to my son. Those charges are spurious and will be dropped once the facts are examined properly. Now, if we can return to the agenda." That's when Marcus stood up. "I'd like to make a motion," he said, his voice carrying across the room. Karen looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "You're not a homeowner. You have no standing to. I'm staying at my sister's house, which makes me a resident. And according to Section 3.7 of your bylaws, any resident can make a motion at an HOA meeting." Karen's jaw tightened. She clearly knew he was right. "Fine. State your motion." "I move that Karen Hendricks be immediately removed as HOA president for gross misconduct, abuse of authority, and criminal behavior." The room erupted. People talking over each other, some in shock, others in agreement. "That motion is out of order," Karen shouted. "You cannot simply." "I second the motion." Mr. Johnson stood up, the same man Karen had fined over his Halloween decorations. "I've been wanting to say this for years. Karen, you're a bully and a tyrant. What you did to that little boy is unforgivable." "We need to vote," someone else called out. "According to Section 3.9, Marcus said calmly, a president can be removed by a 2/3 vote of homeowners present at any meeting if there is cause. I'd say kidnapping a child is the cause." Karen looked at her binder desperately, flipping pages. She knew every rule by heart, but she'd never imagined they'd be used against her. All in favor of removing Karen Hendricks as HOA president. Hands went up, 23 out of 30. "The motion passes," Marcus said. Karen stood frozen at the podium, her face cycling through emotions: shock, rage, disbelief. "You can't do this," she whispered. "This HOA is mine. I built it." "You terrorized this neighborhood," Mrs. Patel said, standing up. "You made all of us afraid, and now you've crossed a line no decent person would ever cross. You hurt a child. You're done," Marcus said simply. "Pack up your binder and go home." What happened next was something I never expected. Marcus's investigation bore serious fruit. His colleague in the Financial Crimes Division discovered that Karen's old mortgage company hadn't just been investigated for fraud. They'd been running a systematic scheme to inflate appraisals and approve loans for people who couldn't afford them. Karen had been right in the middle of it. Even better, the statute of limitations hadn't expired because Karen had actively concealed her involvement. Marcus passed everything to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Within days, federal agents showed up at Karen's door with a warrant. I watched from my window as they searched her house. She stood on her perfect lawn in handcuffs, her face a mask of disbelief. The woman who had wielded power over an entire neighborhood was now powerless herself. The civil rights attorney Marcus connected us with a lawsuit seeking $2 million in damages. Karen's lawyer tried to get it dismissed, but the judge denied the motion. "No HOA authority extends to kidnapping a child," the judge stated clearly. But before the case could go to trial, Karen's situation got much worse. Federal charges were filed: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bank fraud, and making false statements to federal investigators. She was looking at 20 years in federal prison. Suddenly, her lawyer was much more interested in settling our lawsuit. They offered $50,000. The attorney laughed and countered with $1.5 million. They settled for $800,000. Karen's criminal trial for the kidnapping happened first. I had to testify. Jamie had to testify, though the judge allowed him to do it via video link so he wouldn't have to face Karen directly. I'll never forget watching my 7-year-old son tell the jury what happened. She wouldn't let me call my mom, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to go home, and she said I was bad. She said I had to learn my lesson. He started crying. The judge called a recess. In the jury box, I saw several people wiping their eyes. The prosecutor destroyed Karen's defense by showing the HOA bylaws. Nowhere did it give anyone authority to physically detain anyone, let alone a child. Ms. Hendricks is an educated woman, the prosecutor said in closing arguments. She knew exactly what she was doing. She held a 7-year-old child prisoner in her home for more than 30 minutes. She heard him crying for his mother and ignored him. She traumatized a child because of her obsession with controlling her neighbors. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Karen guilty of false imprisonment and child endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in state prison. The federal trial was even more damning. Prosecutors presented evidence of hundreds of fraudulent mortgages and families who'd lost their homes because of Karen's scheme. The federal jury convicted her on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison. Between the sentences, Karen would spend 17 years behind bars. She'd be 74 when she got out if she got out. It took months for Jamie to stop having nightmares. We did therapy play. Therapy specifically designed for traumatized children. Slowly, he started to heal. One day, about 6 months after everything happened, Jamie asked if he could ride his bike again. "Are you sure, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. "Yeah, I miss it. And you said that lady can't hurt me anymore, right?" "That's right. She's in prison, very far away. She can never hurt you again." He put on his helmet and got on his bike. "Mom," he said, stopping at the end of our driveway. "Can I go to the end of the street by myself?" Every instinct screamed no. But I saw the determination in his eyes. "Stay where I can see you. And answer if I call." "I will." I watched him ride to the end of the street, turn around, and ride back. He was grinning. "I did it. You did, baby. I'm so proud of you." The neighborhood changed after Karen was gone. The new HOA president immediately revised the bylaws to be more reasonable. No more fines for grass being slightly too long. No more rules about holiday decorations or paint colors. "We're neighbors," he said at the first meeting. "Not prison guards." The settlement money went into a trust for Jamie's education. It came from pain, but it would fund his future. 2 years after that terrible day, Jamie was 9 years old and finally doing well again. He was back to being a normal kid who loved Pokemon cards, hated homework, and begged to stay up past his bedtime. Marcus got promoted to senior special agent at the FBI and visited us every few months, never missing Jamie's birthday or Christmas. One evening while Marcus was visiting, Jamie asked him something I'd been wondering about, too. "Uncle Marcus, how did you know how to stop the mean lady so fast?" Marcus thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I've dealt with a lot of bad people in my job, buddy. People who hurt others and think they'll get away with it. The key is understanding what they care about most. For some people, it's money. For others, it's power. For Karen, it was control and reputation. Once I understood that, I knew exactly how to beat her, by taking away her control and showing everyone what she really was." "Were you ever afraid of her?" Jamie asked. Marcus smiled and shook his head. "Not even a little bit. You know why? Because I had something she didn't have. I was protecting someone I love. That makes you stronger than any bully could ever be." Jamie hugged him tight. "Thanks for protecting us, Uncle Marcus. Always, buddy, always." It took months for Jamie to fully heal from the trauma. We did intensive therapy together, therapy specifically designed for children who'd experienced frightening situations. Slowly but surely, he started to come back to himself. The nightmares became less frequent. The fear in his eyes faded. He started laughing again, playing again, being a kid again. About 6 months after everything happened, Jamie came to me with a request that both terrified and thrilled me. "Mom, I think I'm ready to ride my bike again." My heart clenched. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" He nodded seriously. "Yeah, I miss it. And you promised that lady can't hurt me anymore, right?" "That's absolutely right. She's in prison, very far away. She can never ever hurt you again." We walked outside together. His bike had been sitting untouched in the garage since that terrible morning. I'd offered to get rid of it, but Jamie had refused. "It's my bike," he'd said firmly. "She doesn't get to take that away from me." He put on his helmet, still a little crooked, because he insisted on doing it himself, and climbed onto his bike. He pedaled slowly at first, then with growing confidence. "Mom," he called out, stopping at the end of our driveway. "Can I go to the end of the street by myself?" Every protective instinct in my body screamed no, but I saw the determination in his eyes. This was important. This was him taking back what Karen Hendricks had tried to steal from him. "Stay where I can see you," I said, "and answer if I call. I will. I promise." I watched him ride to the end of the street, turn around carefully, and ride back. He was grinning from ear to ear, a real, genuine smile. "I did it, Mom. I did it." "You did, baby," I said, pulling him into a hug as tears streamed down my face. "I'm so incredibly proud of you." The neighborhood changed completely after Karen was removed. The new HOA president, Mr. Johnson, immediately revised the bylaws to be far more reasonable. No more fines for grass being slightly too tall. No more absurd rules about holiday decorations or paint colors. No more terrorizing families. "We're neighbors," he said at his first meeting as president. "We're not prison guards. We're a community, and communities take care of each other." The settlement money, all $800,000 of it, went into a trust fund for Jamie's education. I didn't want to touch a penny of it for anything else. It had come from pain and trauma, but it would fund his future and his dreams. Karen's house sat empty for months before finally being sold at a significant loss. A young family with 3 kids bought it, completely renovated it, and painted it a cheerful yellow that would have sent Karen into an absolute rage. The thought made me smile every time I drove past it. 5 years after that terrible September morning, Jamie was 12 years old and thriving. He'd completely overcome his trauma. He was playing soccer, had great friends, and talked constantly about wanting to help people when he grew up. One day, he brought home an essay he'd written for school. The title was, "The Day I Learned About Justice." I read through it with tears streaming down my face. He wrote about his fear, his confusion, wondering if he'd really been bad. He wrote about testifying in court, even though he was terrified. He wrote about Uncle Marcus teaching him that protecting people you love is the most important thing anyone can do. And he ended with these words: "What Mrs. Hendricks did was wrong. But what happened after showed me that the world has more good people than bad people. It showed me that justice is real. It showed me that family protects family." I was 7 years old when this happened, and I'm 12 now. I'm not scared anymore. And if something bad ever happens again, I know I'll be okay, because I have people who love me, and because I know how to be brave. I couldn't stop crying. Marcus read it over my shoulder, and I saw him wipe his eyes, too. "That's powerful, buddy," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Really powerful. My teacher wants to submit it to a writing contest," Jamie said proudly. "You should absolutely let her," I said, pulling him into a tight hug. Today, Jamie is 18 years old and has just graduated from high school with honors. He's been accepted to college on a full scholarship. At his graduation party, he gave a speech thanking everyone who'd supported him. "There was a time when I thought I'd always be afraid," he said. "But my mom and my Uncle Marcus taught me that fear doesn't have to control you, that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when it's scary." Karen Hendricks is still in federal prison. She won't be eligible for parole for another 9 years. I heard through news reports that she became a model prisoner, even helping other inmates learn to read. Maybe she really did change. Maybe therapy and consequences finally broke through her obsession with control. I hope so. Not for her sake, particularly, but because it means one less broken person in the world, causing harm to others. But whether she changed or not, doesn't really matter to our story anymore. Our story became about healing. About a mother protecting her son. About a brother protecting his family. About a little boy who faced something terrible and came out stronger on the other side. Last week, Jamie told Marcus and me about his plans to study criminal justice in college. I want to be like Uncle Marcus, he explained. I want to protect people. I want to make sure bullies like Karen Hendricks never hurt anyone again. Marcus reached across the table and shook Jamie's hand, not like he was still a kid, but like he was an equal, a fellow protector. The world needs more people like you, Marcus said seriously. I'm proud of you, Jamie. I watched my son and my brother, these two people I love most in the world, and felt overwhelming gratitude wash over me. Yes, something terrible had happened to us. Something that could have broken us completely. But we survived it. More than survived, we grew stronger. We learned that justice does exist. That good people really do outnumber the bad. And that family, real, true family, will move heaven and earth to protect each other. Karen Hendricks tried to break a 7-year-old boy over her insane HOA rules and her need for control. Instead, she created a young man who will spend his life making sure people like her never hurt anyone again. That's the real justice. That's the victory that matters most. This Christmas season, as I reflect on everything that happened, I'm reminded that, even in our darkest moments, there is hope, there is healing, there is justice, and there are people who will fight for you with everything they have. Marcus taught me that protecting the people you love makes you stronger than any bully could ever be. Jamie taught me that even the worst trauma can be overcome with love, support, and courage. And Karen Hendricks, well, she taught us all that abusing power always has consequences. No position of authority gives you the right to hurt innocent people, and that karma, when it finally comes, is absolutely devastating. Merry Christmas to everyone reading this story. May you always have people in your life who will fight for you the way my brother fought for us. May you find the courage to stand up to bullies, no matter how powerful they seem. And may you never forget that love, family, and justice will always triumph over cruelty and abuse of power. Always.